doesn't look good, does it?
If you're an actress, it's hard to then transition to a princess, and then from a princess into a homemaking guru on a television show.
Two people have come forward and confirmed that Markle was indeed chatting about that particular visit.
Somebody on his team said, oh, they're very close and they would never snub anybody.
Please welcome to MasterChef Australia, the Duchess of Sussex.
Oh my God.
No. Meghan Markle! What is happening?
3 public defenses concerning Meghan Markle appeared through People magazine, one on August 6th, one on August 7th, and one on August 12th. First to last, that is 6 days. The stories had almost nothing in common. One concerned her conduct on a television set. One concerned a recollection from a private dinner party. One concerned an apparent snub on a red carpet. Not one of them began as a career-ending allegation. Each of them, all the same, ended with a corrective public record attached.
On the 26th of July, MasterChef Australia released the episode that was filmed back in April while Meghan and Harry were on one of their publicized vacations. What is your favorite dish to cook for your family? What did Meghan say?
Minor stories usually fade on their own. These did not fade. Each one drew a firm public denial, while it was still small enough to ignore, and those denials came from different quarters. A named judge, an unnamed host who sat beside her at that dinner, a famous musician. Different people, different rooms, the same week. So the question is what these 3 trivial stories were all quietly standing near, close enough that each one earned its own second story within a week. By the end, we will name the single thing all 3 defenses were protecting, and why answering made it easier to see, not harder.
Meghan has now come out, and people are saying, no, that was untrue. Martha's account of the dinner party, it was untrue, says sources close to Meghan.
And Martha said she talked about it. She just gotten back and she talked about it.
On August 6th, the subject was MasterChef. In a radio interview reported by People magazine, Judge Poh Ling Yeow answered claims that Meghan had caused frustration on set during a guest appearance, calling her a model citizen and saying there was no fuss. Separately, People magazine quoted a source close to Meghan, disputing the less flattering account. On August 7th, the subject was a dinner party. The host, who had sat beside Meghan at a California dinner, told People magazine that Martha Stewart's recollection of the evening is simply untrue. On August 12th, footage had been read as David Foster snubbing Meghan and Harry at a charity event. Foster told People magazine it was a hurtful lie, and said that he had said hello to Harry and Meghan earlier that evening, and they had said hello back. 4 voices, 6 days, 1 woman being defended. Why did stories this small each need an answer? The first of the 3 looks like the most trivial, and on its face, it nearly was. The MasterChef story made one modest charge. It suggested she was difficult, frustrating on set, the kind of guest a crew puts up with rather than warms to, small, and in its own way corrosive. That charge lands somewhere specific. Meghan's public standing leans heavily on the picture of the capable working woman, the producer, the founder, the person who arrives and delivers. A rumor of friction on a set does not touch her marriage or her title. It touches whether people want to hire her again. So the reply that came back was not narrow. Poh Ling Yeow did not just say the particular complaint was untrue. She handed over a verdict on character. Model citizen, no fuss. Those are not words that fix a single disputed detail. They are words that certify a whole professional temperament, the sort of line a reference gives when they want the candidate to get the job. The defense also arrived in 2 layers, not 1. There was Poh, named and on the record, vouching for the conduct, and there was a separate source close to Meghan, quoted by the same magazine, pushing back on the unflattering version from the other side. 2 different mouths, 1 message, both landing in the same week. The account is Poh's, freely given, and not Meghan's to answer for. What matters is not who prompted it, but what it protects. Because strip away the cooking show and the correction is about one thing, whether Meghan is easy to work with, and it answers in the warmest language on offer. That is the first surface guarded. It would be easy to call it a one-off, if only it had arrived alone. It did not arrive alone. A day later, the setting moved from a television kitchen to a private dining room in California. Martha Stewart had shared a recollection of one particular evening with Meghan. That specific memory sits apart from whatever Stewart may think of her in general, and it is only the dinner itself that anyone is disputing. On its face, the recollection was not a scandal. It was an account of how one evening went, from a woman whose whole public life has been built on knowing exactly how an evening should go. That is what gives it weight. Stewart has spent decades as America's authority on the well-run home and the well-behaved guest. When she describes a dinner, the description does not land as gossip. It lands as a verdict from the head of the table, and the verdict touches a different nerve than the cooking show did. The MasterChef story asked whether Meghan is easy to work with. This one asks whether she belongs, whether she sits comfortably among the established lifestyle set of Montecito, or arrives slightly out of place, leaning on a royal title to justify the chair. So the reply was quick and narrow. The host, who had been seated beside Meghan, told the same magazine the account is simply untrue. Not an argument over which course was served or who said what, just a flat contradiction from the person with the neighboring seat. What that contradiction protects is precise. It defends the picture of Meghan as someone at ease in that room, and someone who did not spend the night waving the palace around to earn her place in it. Who nudged the host to speak, if anyone did, the reporting never says. The statement carries no name behind it beyond that one seat at the table, and the pattern holds without filling in that blank. What stays visible is what the correction was built to guard. Two surfaces now. The first story defended how Meghan works. The second defends where she belongs. And the third went after the pillar that is hardest to protect because it happened in the open, in front of the cameras. The third story happened somewhere nothing can be quietly walked back, on a red carpet, in front of a bank of cameras at a charity event. A few seconds of footage were read as David Foster snubbing Harry and Meghan, turning away, withholding the greeting that famous friends are supposed to trade in public. Foster did not let it sit. He told People magazine it was a hurtful lie, and said he had greeted Harry and Meghan earlier that evening and they had greeted him back. That is the whole of it. A brief clip on one side, a firm denial, and an account of a friendly hello on the other. Weigh the two against each other. The trigger was almost nothing, a moment of body language on a busy carpet, the kind of thing that would evaporate on its own within a day. The response was not almost nothing. A hurtful lie is heavy language for a passing clip, and it came from Foster himself, not from a statement issued on anyone's behalf. The reason a tiny moment earns that kind of answer is the surface it threatens. Part of the value of powerful friends is public, not private. They are proof of standing. When one of them appears to turn away on camera, the footage hints that the warmth has cooled, that the circle around Meghan is thinner than the picture suggests. Foster's denial meets that hint at the only level it can reach. He says greetings were exchanged, and that a few seconds of carpet never showed the full interaction. That answers what the clip appeared to show. It does not, and cannot prove the friendship behind it is secure. It repairs the appearance and leaves the private truth exactly where it was. And here the shape of all three finally lines up. 3 stories in 6 days, and not one of them is really about a cooking show, a dinner, or a carpet. The first defended how Meghan works. The second defended where she belongs. The third defends how she is seen beside her friends. 3 surfaces, and under them the same reliance on other people publicly affirming her standing. Which raises the question the arithmetic keeps building toward. Why did all 3 answers reach the public through the very same door? The same door was People magazine. Every one of the 3 corrections reached the public through the same publication, inside the same 6 days. That is the thread that makes them feel like one event instead of 3 coincidences. But the 3 are less alike than that thread suggests, because the machinery behind each one is different. The MasterChef defense came from a named television judge speaking in a radio interview, which People then reported, alongside a separate and unnamed source close to Meghan. The dinner denial came from the host of the evening, quoted directly and given no name. The carpet denial came from David Foster, a famous man speaking plainly under his own name, a named professional, an unnamed host, and a celebrity. 3 different kinds of voice, arriving by 3 different routes. So the continuity is not in the speakers, it is in the channel. When one outlet carries every correction, the corrections start to rhyme, even if nobody arranged for them to. The magazine becomes the through line, the place a reader lands and finds, again and again, the flattering version of a contested story about the same woman. And the shared channel proves nothing was arranged. People writes about Meghan constantly, the way it writes about a small set of names it knows its readers will click. A publication that covers her that often is simply where a correction concerning her would naturally surface. The continuity is a fact about one outlet's habits and its audience, not the fingerprint of a hand working behind the scenes. Which leaves the real question exposed and unanswered. If nothing was arranged, and coordination cannot even be safely assumed, then what is it, precisely, that 3 corrections in one magazine in 6 days actually prove? What 3 corrections in 6 days actually prove is narrow. Narrower than the pattern makes it feel, and harder to wave off than that. 2 of the facts can simply be counted. Timing, that the corrections clustered inside a single stretch of 6 days. Concentration, that they gathered around one woman in one magazine. Those hold no matter who is reading them. They can be tallied and checked by anyone. The third piece is not a count, it is a reading. Every one of the answers, whatever set it moving, worked to protect Meghan's image rather than complicate it. That is interpretation, led by the evidence but interpretation all the same. The meaning laid over the pattern rather than a number pulled out of it. It is the strongest claim here, and also the one that asks to be argued rather than simply added up. Even granting that reading, the arithmetic still says nothing about a hand on the controls. It does not show common authorship, it does not show that Meghan instructed a single one of these people, and it reveals nothing about what she felt or wanted in private. That door stays shut, and it should. Because taken one at a time, every correction has a plain and innocent explanation. Poh Ling Yeow liked a guest and said so. The dinner host believed Stewart had it wrong and said so. Foster found a clip insulting and said so. Not one of them requires a puppeteer, and each may simply have pushed back on an account they considered false. And still the larger point survives all of it. A system does not need a commander to move as one. An ecosystem of friends, sources, participants, and a familiar magazine can generate a run of corrective stories around the same figure without anyone coordinating anything, each person acting for reasons entirely their own. Predictable behavior, no central command required. Whether each answer was freely volunteered or quietly encouraged changes the motive behind it. It does not change the result. 3-second stories in a single week, each dragging a fading item back into view and bending it toward the flattering version. The intent stays unprovable. The effect is already on the record. And that effect carried a cost. None of the corrections were built to pay. The cost is quiet, and it works against the very thing the corrections were meant to secure. A small story, left alone, tends to die. An accusation of friction on a set, an unflattering dinner memory, a few ambiguous seconds on a carpet. Ignored, each of those slides out of view within a news cycle and takes its sting with it. A correction does the opposite. It is a fresh headline in its own right. It gives the original a second date, a second search result, a second reason to be repeated, this time with the denial stapled to it. The answer outlives the thing it was answering. And once there are 3 answers inside a single week, they stop being read one at a time. Each of them, taken alone, may be perfectly fair. A person simply setting a record straight, but 3 harden into a set, and a set raises a question no single story ever could. Not what happened at the dinner, or on the set, or on the carpet, but why the record around one person needs correcting quite so often. That is the real shift. The original items were tiny and specific, 3 limited moments. The cycle of responses turned them into something general, a standing question about who controls the narrative, which not one of those small stories could have carried on its own. Because the more often a preferred version has to be reinforced from outside, the more the reinforcing becomes the thing worth looking at. Past a certain point, the machinery draws more attention than the stories it was built to settle. The repair grows more conspicuous than whatever it was repairing. 3 corrections meant to make the noise smaller ended up giving it a longer life and a bigger frame, which leaves one thing still unnamed. 3 corrections, 3 surfaces, all of them guarding a single point underneath. The question left standing is simple. What, exactly, was all of this protecting? The thing all 3 defenses were protecting was never a cooking show, a dinner, or a friendship. It was the right to say who Meghan is. Each of those surfaces depends on a verdict she cannot hand down about herself. Professional composure is the first. A person cannot credibly announce their own ease on a set. It has to be granted by the people who were actually in the room, which is what a judge supplied by calling her a model citizen who caused no fuss. The power of that line is not in the words. It is in the fact that someone else was the one saying them. Elite belonging works the same way and stays just as far outside her control. In the dinner story, that verdict arrived in a narrower form. The host seated beside her did not rise to announce that Meghan belonged. The host simply contradicted the account, suggesting she had not, calling Martha Stewart's recollection of the evening untrue. The defense of belonging came not as praise, but as a denial, and it still came from a mouth other than Meghan's. Influential friendship follows the identical shape, and Foster's part stayed carefully inside what he could actually speak to. He did not testify that the private bond was warm or unbroken. He answered the footage. He said greetings had been exchanged, that he had said hello and been greeted back, and he corrected what a few seconds of carpet appeared to show. The warmth behind it he left alone, because the state of a friendship is not a thing one sentence can certify. The common thread runs straight underneath all 3. On every front, the verdict was never hers to issue. Someone else vouches for the conduct. Someone else disputes the story that would push her out of the room. Someone else answers for the friendship. Her standing, on all three surfaces, is written from the outside in. That is the raw nerve. Not the marriage, not the titles, not the money, but the exposed fact that the power to define her public standing sits partly in other people's hands. It is the one thing a fortune cannot buy outright and a crown cannot settle, and it is exactly what 3 corrections in 6 days were built to guard. The pattern is plain enough to state without flinching. 3 defenses, 6 days, each one firing at the same trigger. The instant an outside account threatened to define Meghan on one of those fronts, the ecosystem around her moved to define it back. That is simply how a system built around a single contested reputation behaves the moment that reputation is touched, and it is why the same shape repeated 3 times in a week around one name and no one else's. And that is the trap folded into the machinery. When every small story earns a second story, the corrections stop being the footnote and become the headline. The system built to protect a reputation slowly turns into the reputation. In the end, the story is no longer the set, the dinner, or the carpet. The story is the answering itself, and the answering is the thing now under the brightest light. And if 3 tiny headlines can reveal the machinery around a public image, the next question is what that machinery does to the people inside it. That is exactly where our investigation into the insider claims about Meghan's demands for image control begins.